High Admiral Zextal of the Meridian Empire stood motionless before the grand observation window of the Imperial Command Station, Eternal Vigilance. His crystalline exoskeleton reflected the light of distant stars as he contemplated the sensor readings displayed before him. The data made no sense, yet there it was. Humanity had found the beacon. Not just found it, but managed to decode its quantum signature in mere days, a feat that had taken the Empire's finest minds decades to accomplish. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice carrying the harmonics of disbelief that made his species' language so distinctive. "They are barely interstellar. Their civilization has existed for less than 100,000 cycles." Behind him, strategic analyst Valshi cleared her throat, a sound like chiming crystals. "The evidence is conclusive, High Admiral. Not only did they decode the beacon, but they've already begun to implement some of its theoretical frameworks. Our long-range sensors detected quantum fluctuations consistent with early attempts at in-space manipulation." Zextal's crystalline fingers traced patterns in the air, manipulating the holographic display. The human vessel that had discovered the beacon was tiny, almost primitive by Imperial standards. Yet something about it troubled him deeply. Its power readings were inconsistent, its sensor profile somehow both present and absent simultaneously. "Show me the historical comparison," he commanded. The display shifted, showing the technological progression curves of every known spacefaring species. All followed a predictable pattern. Centuries of slow advancement followed by exponential growth after discovering key technologies. All except humanity's curve, which looked less like a curve and more like a vertical line. "Their acceleration is unprecedented," Valshi continued. "From their first primitive spaceflight to their current capabilities took less than 300 cycles. The statistical probability of such advancement is—" "Never tell me the odds, analyst," Zextal interrupted. "What I want to know is how they managed to bypass the natural progression of technological development. No species simply jumps from chemical propulsion to quantum mechanics without intermediate steps." The strategic analyst's crystalline form shifted colors slightly, indicating discomfort. "There is one theory, High Admiral. We believe they might be guessing." "Guessing?" The word carried tones of both incredulity and amusement in the Imperial language. "Yes, sir. Their scientific methods appear to be based on a combination of theoretical modeling and what they call intuitive leaps. They propose solutions before fully understanding the underlying principles, then work backward to explain why their solutions work. It's completely contrary to proper scientific methodology." Zextal turned back to the window, watching as more ships arrived in response to his summons. The Imperial fleet was assembling, the largest gathering of military might since the Succession Wars 5,000 cycles ago. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, the culmination of millions of cycles of careful, methodical advancement. "How many ships have they sent to study the beacon?" he asked. "Just the one, High Admiral. The vessel designated Pioneer Spirit. Crew of 15. 15. Now it was Zextal's turn to shift colors in discomfort. "To study a Class X quantum artifact. The minimum safe observation team should be at least 100 specialists." Valshi's response was interrupted by a new alert on the command display. "Sir, we're detecting unusual activity from the human vessel. There, they appear to be attempting to activate the beacon." Zextal's entire form flashed brilliant white in alarm. "Impossible. The activation sequences alone took our scientists thousands of cycles to decode. They can't possibly." The space around the beacon suddenly warped, reality itself seeming to fold and unfold like origami in the hands of a master. The human ship sat at the center of the distortion, tiny and insignificant looking, yet somehow controlling forces that should have been far beyond their comprehension. "All ships, battle stations," Zextal commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones of emergency protocols. "Deploy the fleet in standard containment formation. If they've managed to destabilize the beacon." He left the thought unfinished. Everyone knew what was at stake. The quantum beacons were part of a network that predated even the Empire, artifacts of such complexity that even after millions of cycles, they were still uncovering their secrets. As the Imperial fleet moved into position, surrounding the beacon and the human vessel in a sphere of overwhelming military might, Zextal received a priority communication from the Imperial Council itself. The message was brief, but carried the full authority of the Empire's ruling body. The humans must not be allowed to proceed. Their reckless advancement threatens the natural order. You are authorized to take whatever measures necessary to contain this situation. Zextal acknowledged the order, even as he watched the human vessel continue its seemingly impossible manipulation of quantum forces. He had studied humanity's brief history, their rapid rise from planetary civilization to spacefaring species. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and now, apparently, capable of fundamentally altering the fabric of reality through what amounted to educated guesswork. "Send the warning," he commanded. "All frequencies, all languages we've decoded from their communications. Let them know exactly what kind of fire they're playing with." The response from the human vessel was not what anyone expected. Instead of fear or submission in the face of overwhelming force, they received a simple message. "Thanks for the concern, but we got this figured out. Mostly, want to watch something cool?" Before High Admiral Zextal could respond to the human's flippant message, the quantum beacon pulsed with energy that defied Imperial sensors. The Pioneer Spirit, that absurdly small vessel with its crew of 15, began to move in ways that violated everything the Empire knew about space-time mechanics. "Analysis," Zextal demanded, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Velshi's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, her form cycling through colors of confusion and disbelief. "Sir, they're using the beacon as some sort of amplifier. The quantum signatures suggest they're creating a localized bubble of altered physics, but the power requirements for such a manipulation would be..." The human ship suddenly vanished, only to reappear instantaneously at the edge of the Imperial fleet's formation. No hyperspace signature, no quantum wake, no indication of conventional movement. It was simply there, then here. "Impossible," Velshi whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of awe and terror. "They're not just manipulating space. They're ignoring it entirely." A new transmission arrived from the Pioneer Spirit, this time with visual accompaniment. The human captain appeared on the command center's main display, a female with dark skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight configuration. She was smiling, an expression that Zextal's cultural briefings identified as either friendly or predatory, depending on context. "High Admiral," she said, inclining her head slightly. "I'm Captain Maya Chen of the Pioneer Spirit. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we found that sometimes the best way to start a conversation is to demonstrate that we're worth talking to." Zextal's form shifted through several color patterns before settling on the formal hues of diplomatic engagement. "Captain Chen, you have violated restricted space, interfered with a Class X quantum artifact, and demonstrated potentially hostile capabilities in the presence of an Imperial battle fleet. Explain yourself." Chen's smile widened slightly. "Actually, Admiral, we were invited. The beacon's been calling to us for quite some time. We just finally figured out how to answer." A ripple of harmonic discord spread through the command center. Velshi's analysis crystals were vibrating with such intensity that they produced an audible hum. "Sir, she's technically correct. The quantum beacon's base frequency perfectly matches human brainwave patterns. It's as if it was designed for them," Zextal finished, his voice carrying undertones of revelation and concern. "But that's not possible. The beacons are millions of cycles old. Humanity didn't even exist when they were created." "Time's funny that way," Chen responded, somehow having heard the exchange despite Imperial encryption. "Sometimes the lock exists before the key. Sometimes the question comes after the answer. Speaking of which," she glanced down at something off-screen. You might want to adjust your sensor protocols. The light show's about to start. The quantum beacon pulsed again, but this time the energy patterns were different. Instead of the chaotic interference the humans had caused earlier, this was structured, deliberate. The pioneer spirit began to move again, not through space, but through possibility itself. Each movement left afterimages, not of where the ship had been, but of where it might have been, could have been, should have been. They're quantum surfing, Valshi reported, her voice thick with disbelief. Riding probability waves like they're some kind of cosmic ocean. The mathematical precision required to maintain coherence at that scale is beyond anything we've achieved through careful, methodical advancement, Zextal corrected. But they're not being methodical, are they? They're intuiting their way through quantum mechanics like a child learning to swim by being thrown into deep water. The Imperial Fleet's sensors were recording everything, generating petabytes of data every second, as the pioneer spirit demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible for such a young species. But more concerning than the technological display was what it represented. Humanity hadn't just stumbled upon advanced technology. They were actively innovating with it, pushing boundaries that the Empire hadn't even recognized as boundaries. "Sir," Valshi interrupted his thoughts, "I'm detecting energy buildups in similar frequency ranges across multiple sectors. More beacons are activating." "How many?" "All of them, sir. The entire network is waking up." Captain Chen's image reappeared on the command screen. "Don't worry, Admiral. We're not doing anything dangerous. Well, not dangerous. The beacons were designed as a communication network, but somewhere along the way, they got stuck in standby mode. We're just rebooting the system." Sextal's form crystallized into the pattern indicating absolute authority. "You will cease these activities immediately. The Empire has spent millions of cycles studying the beacon network. We have protocols, procedures, safeguards." "With all due respect, Admiral," Chen interrupted, "those protocols are exactly why you've spent millions of cycles studying the beacons without actually understanding them. Sometimes you have to stop analyzing and start listening. The beacons aren't just technology. They're trying to tell us something. And for whatever reason, they're speaking our language." The implications were staggering. If the humans were right, if they truly had an intuitive understanding of technology that the Empire had spent millennia trying to decode, the political and military ramifications alone would shake the foundations of Imperial society. "The Council will never accept this," Zextal said, more to himself than to the human captain. Chen's expression softened slightly. "They might not have a choice, Admiral. Change is coming, ready or not. The question is, do you want to be part of it, or do you want to stand in its way?" As if to emphasize her point, the pioneer spirit began to glow with an inner light that defied spectral analysis. The quantum beacon's pulse synchronized with the ship's energy signature, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The Imperial Council's response was immediate and predictable. Hundreds of ships began emerging from hyperspace, reinforcing Zextal's already considerable fleet. Each vessel was a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to ash. The message was clear. The Empire would not be dictated to by upstart humans. But Captain Chen didn't seem concerned. If anything, she appeared amused by the display of military might. "You know," she said conversationally, "we had a saying back in the 21st century. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But we've learned something interesting since then." The pioneer spirit began to change. Its hull seemed to ripple like water, the metal flowing and reforming into new configurations. Imperial sensors struggled to maintain a lock on the vessel as it shifted through states of matter that shouldn't have been possible. "Any sufficiently understood magic," Chen continued, "is just technology waiting to be invented." Valshi's analysis crystals were vibrating so intensely they threatened to shatter. "Sir, the human vessel, it's not just manipulating quantum states anymore. It's actively rewriting local physics. The computational power required for such calculations would exceed the combined processing capacity of the entire Imperial fleet. That's because you're trying to calculate everything, Chen interjected. Sometimes you have to stop counting and start feeling. The universe has rhythms, patterns. Once you learn to recognize them, you don't need to calculate every variable. You just dance. As if to demonstrate her point, the pioneer spirit began moving through space in ways that defied conventional physics. It left trails of probability in its wake, each movement splitting reality into countless potential states before collapsing back into a single timeline. The effect was beautiful and terrifying. Enough of these games, Zextal demanded, though his voice carried harmonics of uncertainty. What do you want? Want? Chen raised an eyebrow. Admiral, we're not here to make demands. We're here to share. The beacon network isn't just a collection of ancient artifacts. It's an invitation. A test, maybe. And humanity just happened to be the first ones to pass it. A new alert drew Zextal's attention. The quantum beacon was emitting patterns that exactly matched the pioneer spirit's energy signature. No, not matched. They were in dialogue, the ship and the beacon exchanging information at a rate that made Imperial quantum computers look like primitive calculators. Sir, Valshi's voice was barely a whisper. I'm detecting similar exchanges throughout the network. The humans aren't just activating the beacons. They're teaching them. Or perhaps they're teaching us. Zextal finished. He turned his full attention to Captain Chen's image. You knew this would happen. You knew what the beacons were capable of before you ever arrived. Chen shook her head. We had theories, educated guesses. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our intelligence. It's our willingness to take leaps of faith, to try things that shouldn't work, to break rules we don't fully understand. The pioneer spirit's transformation continued. Its hull now resembled liquid crystal, similar to Imperial biotechnology, but fundamentally different, where Imperial tech was rigid, structured, following patterns refined over millions of cycles. The human ship was fluid, adaptive, evolving in real time. The Empire built its civilization on careful advancement. Chen continued. Each step proven, tested, verified before moving forward. It's admirable, in its way. Safe, predictable. But the universe isn't safe or predictable. It's wild, chaotic, full of possibilities that can't be contained by rules or protocols. Zextal watched as more beacons activated across the galaxy, each one resonating with the same strange energy the humans had unleashed. You're changing everything, he said, his voice carrying harmonics of both wonder and dread. Change is the only constant in the universe, Admiral. The beacons weren't left as artifacts to be studied. They were seeds, planted by someone who knew that eventually a species would come along that could help them grow. The implication staggered him. And that species is humanity. You barely understand your own technology. Half your advancements seem to be based on lucky guesses and reckless experimentation. Exactly. Chen's enthusiasm was apparent even through the alien communication system. We don't let our lack of understanding stop us from trying. We see patterns and make intuitive leaps. Sometimes we're wrong, sometimes spectacularly so. But sometimes, she gestured at the transformed pioneer spirit, at the awakening beacon network, at the very fabric of space-time rippling with new possibilities. Sometimes we surprise even ourselves. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had spent millennia building its civilization on the foundations of methodical progress, careful advancement, and rigid protocols. Now humanity had arrived, breaking rules they didn't even know existed, achieving impossible things through what seemed like sheer audacity. The Imperial Council's holographic avatars materialized in the command center, their crystalline forms blazing with the colors of supreme authority. High Counselor Vexmora, her ancient form layered with ceremonial growth patterns representing millions of cycles of service, fixed her gaze on the transformed pioneer spirit. "This cannot be allowed to continue," she declared, her voice resonating with harmonics that made junior officers' crystals vibrate in sympathy. "The humans threaten everything we have built. Their reckless manipulation of forces they barely understand could unravel the very fabric of civilization." Captain Chen's image remained on the main display, watching the Council's arrival with quiet interest. The pioneer spirit hung in space like a liquid constellation, its transformed hull reflecting and refracting light in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "With respect, High Counselor," Chen said, her voice carrying none of the fear or awe that Imperial citizens would have shown, "I think you're missing the point. We're not threatening your civilization. We're offering to help it evolve." "Evolution must be controlled," another counselor argued. "Measured. Tested. Your species jumps from discovery to discovery like a quantum particle, unpredictable and dangerous." The pioneer spirit's hull rippled, and suddenly the ship was simultaneously in multiple locations, each version slightly different, as if it was showing all its potential forms at once. "That's exactly how quantum particles are supposed to behave," Chen pointed out. "It's only when you try to pin them down, to force them into rigid patterns, that you limit their potential." Valshi, who had been analyzing the ongoing changes in the beacon network, suddenly straightened. "Sir, Council members, you need to see this." She projected a galaxy-wide view, showing the spreading wave of beacon activations. But there was something else, something happening in the spaces between. "The gaps are filling in," Zextol realized, his voice carrying harmonics of astonishment. "The beacons aren't just communicating. They're creating new connections, new pathways through space-time. The network was never meant to be static," Chen explained. "It's a living system, designed to grow and adapt. But it needed a catalyst, a species that could think the way it thinks. Not in straight lines and rigid protocols, but in possibilities and patterns." High Counselor Vexmore's form darkened with anger. "You presume too much, human. The Empire has maintained order in this galaxy for millions of cycles. We will not allow." She was interrupted by a sudden shift in reality itself. The space around the pioneer spirit began to fold in impossible ways, and for a moment, everyone present glimpsed something vast and incomprehensible. The beacon network not as it was, but as it could be, as it was meant to be. "Orders, High Counselor?" Zextol asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. But before she could respond, Valshi's crystals began resonating with a new frequency. "Sir, Council members, I'm detecting changes in our ships. The beacon network's influence is spreading. Our quantum cores are responding to the new patterns. They're adapting." Throughout the Imperial fleet, vessels began to transform. Not as dramatically as the pioneer spirit, but subtly, their rigid crystalline structures becoming more fluid, more responsive. The change wasn't just physical. The ship's quantum processors were evolving, learning to think in new ways. "You see," Chen's voice was gentle now, "your civilization hasn't just been studying the beacons. You've been unconsciously absorbing their influence for millions of cycles. All that time, your technology was slowly preparing for this moment. We're just the key that fits the lock you've been building all along." The council members watched in horror and fascination as their carefully controlled, meticulously advanced technology began to awaken to new possibilities. Some ships embraced the change, their crews instinctively understanding the patterns. Others resisted, their systems straining against the transformation. "This is madness," Vexmora declared, but there was an undertone of uncertainty in her harmonics. "We cannot simply abandon millions of cycles of proven methodology for chaos." "Not chaos," Zextol corrected, watching as his flagship systems began to resonate with the new frequencies. "Evolution. The humans aren't destroying our methods. They're showing us their limitations. And perhaps," he turned to face the council, his form displaying colors of revelation, "perhaps it's time we learn to embrace a little uncertainty." The command center erupted in discord as council members argued, their harmonics clashing in waves of conflicting emotion. But through it all, the pioneer spirit continued its dance with reality, showing them glimpses of what their technology could become if they dared to let it grow beyond their careful constraints. "The choice is yours," Chen said quietly. "You can fight this change, try to force the universe back into its comfortable patterns, or you can learn to dance with it, to see the beauty in uncertainty, the strength in adaptation." In the silence that followed Captain Chen's words, something remarkable happened. An Imperial science vessel, one of the smallest ships in the assembled fleet, began to move. Not with the precise, calculated movements typical of Imperial vessels, but with the fluid grace they had observed in the pioneer spirit. Its crystalline structure rippled with new possibilities, its quantum core resonating with frequencies that echoed through space-time. "Lieutenant Kexery," Zextal identified the vessel's commander. "What are you doing?" The young officer's response carried harmonics of excitement rather than fear. "Testing a theory, Admiral. Our ship's systems, they're not just changing. They're remembering. This is how they were meant to work all along." The science vessel danced through space, leaving probability trails in its wake. Where the pioneer spirit had shown them what was possible, this ship was showing them how to achieve it. The crew's natural crystalline resonance, combined with millions of cycles of Imperial engineering, was creating something entirely new, a hybrid of methodical precision and intuitive understanding. High Counselor Vexmora watched in stunned silence as more ships began to follow suit, not all at once, and not all in the same way, but each finding its own path to transformation. This is not how progress is meant to occur," she protested, but the conviction had drained from her harmonics. "Isn't it?" Captain Chen's question was gentle. "Look at your own history. Every major advancement in Imperial technology came not from careful planning, but from moments of inspiration. You just convinced yourselves afterward that it was all part of a controlled process." Valshi's analysis crystals hummed with new understanding. "The beacon network, it's not just teaching us new technology. It's teaching us new ways of thinking. The humans didn't break our protocols. They showed us they were never needed in the first place." Throughout the fleet, ships and crews were discovering capabilities that had always been latent in their technology. The rigid crystalline structures that had defined Imperial engineering for millions of cycles were becoming fluid, adaptive, alive with possibility. But unlike the chaos the Council had feared, this transformation was bringing a deeper kind of order, the natural harmony of systems working as they were truly meant to. "Think of it like learning to swim," Chen suggested, watching the transformation spread through the fleet. "You can study water dynamics for years, calculate every possible movement, plan each stroke, or you can feel the flow of the water and let your body learn its rhythms naturally. Both approaches can work, but only one lets you truly understand the nature of what you're doing." The pioneer spirit, still shimmering with impossible light, began to move through the fleet. But now it wasn't showing off or demonstrating superior technology. Instead, it was dancing with the Imperial ships, showing them how to interpret the patterns, how to read the quantum harmonies that had always existed in the space between possibilities. Zextal found himself moving his flagship alongside the human vessel, not through careful calculation, but through an intuitive understanding that seemed to rise from his crystalline core. "We're not losing control," he realized, his voice carrying harmonics of wonder. "We're gaining understanding." "Precisely," Chen agreed. The beacons weren't left as a test or a challenge. They're teachers, waiting for students who were ready to learn not just what they had to share, but how to think in new ways. The council members watched as their carefully ordered fleet transformed into something that defied their traditional metrics, but demonstrated a beauty and efficiency they couldn't deny. Ships moved in harmony with space itself, their crews discovering that their crystalline nature made them uniquely suited to this new way of interacting with reality. "So what happens now?" Vexmora asked, her harmonics suggesting she already knew the answer. "Now," Chen smiled. "Now we learn from each other. You have millions of cycles of accumulated knowledge and wisdom. We have the ability to see patterns you've missed and imagine possibilities you haven't considered. Together, she gestured at the transformed fleet, at the awakened beacon network spanning the galaxy. Together, we can dance with the universe itself. The Imperial fleet hung in space, no longer a rigid formation of warships, but a living constellation of possibility. The pioneer spirit moved among them, not as an intruder or a superior force, but as a partner in discovery. And throughout the galaxy, the beacon network continued to pulse with new energy, new patterns, new potential. The Empire will never be the same, Vex Mora observed, but her harmonics had shifted from fear to acceptance. No, Zextal agreed, watching as his crews began to experiment with their newfound capabilities. It will be better. We spent millions of cycles trying to impose order on the universe. Perhaps it's time we learn to move with its natural rhythms instead. And so, in the space between stars, two civilizations began to learn from each other. The Empire's methodical precision, combined with humanity's intuitive leaps, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. The beacon network continued to evolve, its ancient wisdom finally finding expression through the partnership of those who had built upon it and those who had dared to reimagine it. It wasn't the end of an era, but the beginning of one. A time when a galaxy would learn to dance to the quantum rhythms that had always been there, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to step beyond the boundaries of what they thought was possible.